Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, I was just thinking right as we were about to hit record that this feels kind of like the last show before everything starts to get like really real. Like we have these long off seasons and there's little breaks in the middle, like, oh, it's spring football and oh, it's whatever. But man, a week from now, we're going to be basically done, almost done with Big Ten Media Days. Season's going to be right around, fall camp's right around the
Mhm.
corner. We're going to have just an absolute tsunami of content. This feels like, the episode of a TV series right before, there's going to be something like huge happening. It's like the episode right before then, where everyone's kind of sitting around and it's like, when are they going to get to the fireworks factory? That's kind of how I feel like right now.
As we drop this, we will be 2 weeks out from camp opening and forget about it. Like, it is here, it is upon us. I hope you people are happy because this is going to be a miserable 5 months or whatever it is of work, of just constant getting to campus and then waiting. And I'm not here to complain. We could do that off the air. But yeah, we're all definitely looking forward to it. And every year before you know it, like we're doing, hey, instant recap from first day of camp. And then like 2 hours later, it's like, can you believe we're 6 games into the season? Can you believe we're already mid-October?
Yeah, it feels like you start now and, we're sitting outside of a hotel in, a couple weeks. And then the season starts, and then all of a sudden it's, Halloween and it's cold, and we're, trying to put together a content plan for Michigan Week, which is only a couple weeks away. And then all of a sudden that's done. And, several recent years have functionally ended when that was done. But I'm guessing it will. This year will be a little more interesting for a little longer than a couple of the recent ones have. But yeah, you wait all year for this season, and it's such a short season. It is going to be a much longer season this year, I think. But definitely, it is a time of year that goes incredibly fast, and it feels like we don't ever stop moving. Which, again, Tony doesn't have to. Tony can complain off air. I'm not going to complain about it. This is the time of year we wait all year for, so I am definitely not going to complain about it.
Yeah, you said this time we don't stop moving. And I want to be like, credit to us for the effort and the work. But until that time, there are some things that people can do to pass the time. One of them being EA's college football game that has come out, early release, dropped on Monday. I believe it goes on sale to the regular public, the people who didn't pay $30 extra to get it 4 days in advance. I believe goes on sale tomorrow, so everybody will have access to it. But I thought, let's spend some time, at least at the start of the show, talking about it. I've played it. I've got my hands on it. Tom, you have not played it yet, so you're just going to hear my thoughts on it and what I've seen, what I've experienced, some pros, some cons, and things like that. I will say they said this was basically like a love letter to college football fans, and I would agree with that. You're talking about for the Ohio State stuff, the games there. They've got Hell's Bells on third down. They've got Victory Bell right after a win. That's clanging in the background. I was surprised to have Carmen, Ohio, then with the team afterwards as well. If you stick around long enough, they've got that going. They've got fans doing OHIO to the camera. Sadly, Tom, you're going to be upset about this one. No cowboy jumpsuits.
Man, I thought this game was supposed to be about all the best things about college football, and yet, no people, no self-aggrandizing cowboy. Yeah, I mean, come on, what is it even an Ohio State football game if he doesn't show up? I don't know. Luckily, we haven't had to find out, but I mean, won't you be sad if he doesn't?
And that is, you cannot create fans. You can create players, you can edit players, you cannot edit fans. Some other people who are not in this game were some of the players that did not opt in. JT Tuimoloau, Josh Simmons, there's no Mylan Graham, there's no Demarion Witten, and there are a few others as well. Um, so I don't know. I don't think there's a Will Smith Jr. Just interesting to see who opts in, who opts out. I was surprised. And so then I think the player that they have in place of JT Tuimoloau, his name is something like Tyler Bourne, and I just know he's going to get some hate on social media because he's not playing well enough or whatever. So there's that. Overall, though, it's not a Madden reskin or anything like that that people are worried about. It's still very familiar. Uh, I did spend that first day. It dropped at like 4 p.m. and I did not. I left the house to like walk the dog and things like that, but I didn't really go anywhere. I started dozing off about 11:30 while I was running the option with Army. So like this is a full day of just getting back to the time when you could just let the world go and just stare in front of the TV and have no cares. But Tom, it is such a different world for everybody who used to do that. Like everybody has moved on with their lives. Some of them, not me. Other people have moved on and become put themselves in situations of their own doing where they can't just leave the world for 8 hours.
Yeah, it feels like this has brought a lot of people back to 2010 or 2012 or whenever the last time they played this game was, and the realities of the world in terms of like, hey, I probably have more responsibilities at work than I did back then, and I might have more
Mhm.
responsibilities around home than I did back then, and I have a few more kids to take to something or other than I did back then. So yeah, I think I saw one of those like real eye rolling think pieces about, well, actually, this is really, people aren't actually excited about the game. They're actually excited about trying to recapture a lost period. It's like, shut up. They like the game. Shut up. I liked the game back then when I had no responsibilities. I'm sure I would like the game right now. The reality of my world is I have two kids who are, teenagers or, early teenagers or almost teenagers. And I'm like, I haven't had a video game system in my house yet since they've been around. I don't know if I want to really introduce that in terms of taking attention away from school and all that kind of stuff. So we have not done that yet. We'll see. I may get talked into it at some point, but so far, Tony, I'm holding strong, holding firm, being the bad cop. Tony, I love to be the bad cop.
I mean, don't give in right now because they're close to scholarships and things like that. You don't want that to go out the window because you wanted to play a little bit of a video game. Got to stay strong, Tom. I appreciate that move. Be strong. Don't give in. Be the bad cop if you have to. It's what you're good at. Um, some other things about this game. I played at Penn State in a whiteout, and one of the interesting things about this game is it takes that into consideration. So, like, if you're an environment that is crazy like that, and you're on offense, and you kind of like bring up the screen to see like where all the routes are, the routes are squiggly. Like Will Howard had a question mark over top of his head. Like this is not ideal, and you gotta hope that you're throwing it to the right place, basically on some of these things. And you'll also be glad to know that kicking is much different, and you got some legitimate college kicking going on as well. I saw simmed Ohio State Michigan game, and Michigan doinked a field goal to win it. Ohio State came down, won it in the final seconds. College kickers alive and well in this game. I wouldn't do a road to glory type of thing in that. Don't be the guy. I want to be a kicker in college. Not- Don't set out to be that. If you fall back to do that, like try to be something else. But if you fall back, then I guess that's okay.
Try to make something of yourself. And if you can't do that, then just be a scholarship athlete for an FBS football team. That's fine. It's like the safety school of college
Mhm.
athletics is my understanding. Yeah, I do appreciate the great patriots at EA Sports getting the go for it mentality ingrained in everyone's head. Listen, your kicker's going to miss it anyway. You might as well go for it on 4th and 4. There's no reason not to. This is, Tony, this is how we save America, by teaching the next generation that kicking is for cowards.
You can set your aggressiveness level up. I don't know if it is to the point of eliminate kickers. Speaking of going for two and things of that nature. So I am currently, I started like a dynasty with North Carolina State just to see what it was like. And it tells you, like
Can
gives
we
you
back
weekly.
up and figure and ask? There are people who will go for, hey, I want to try and set a dynasty at UTEP or Wyoming. Like that's like extremely my speed of the game, or Navy, somewhere like that. Why North Carolina? North Carolina State seems like it's neither good enough to be
Mhm.
interesting for that reason, nor bad enough to be interesting for that reason. So what exactly made you want to be this generation's Chuck Amato?
exactly what you said, because right now I'm just starting the game out. I'm not good enough to take my North Texas Mean Green to the promised land just yet because these things are hard. And so I thought, you know what? Let me just take a team. If I win the conference, I'm in the playoffs, and then anything can happen from there. I accidentally simmed the first week because I didn't know what I was doing. And then my first game playing with North Carolina State and Grayson McCall, and that was the main reason. I needed a quarterback, and so I went with that. But also, you could win the ACC. But then my second game, my first technical game, is at Tennessee, and I was not prepared for that. It took all of my skill, all of my might to come away with a 2-touchdown victory there. And I had recruits on the line, Tom. I'm telling you, that's another thing. I'm throwing everything I can to land a 5-star quarterback, and my recruiting is working after a couple of weeks. So I'm doing well there. But the reason I bring that up is because there's a weekly recap of games and like the game of the week or whatever. The game of the week, I think the second week of my dynasty, is a 54-52 win by Iowa over Iowa State in overtime. Maybe I can go back and check the box score on that to see how many overtimes, but I'm thinking about there's no way this is a simple 7 touchdowns or whatever. Like, there's nothing simple about this. I'm wondering exactly how many overtimes it would take for Iowa to get 54 points.
I think, I mean, you got to remember there's no more Brian Ferentz anymore. And that's something
Mm.
I was looking a little bit at Iowa and trying to figure out exactly how different I think they're going to be this year. And that I think is one of the more interesting questions. But 54 points for Iowa feels a lot like, I don't know, 18 to 20 safeties in regulation, and then, no touchdowns in the first several periods of overtime. And then when you get to the 2-point shootout, they pick up another, whatever's necessary there, 8, 9, something like that to get there. They spend all this time talking about, making this game as realistic as possible. And then feels like that might not have, they might have missed the mark there.
Well, that's your opinion. I will say also, I simmed a season this morning just to see. It takes like 5 minutes to sim a season, so that all works pretty well. Will Howard does win the Player of the Year, not the Heisman, the Player of the Year. Unfortunately, only like third in the Quarterback of the Year award. So, and yes, Michigan did beat Ohio State, but Ohio State did win the national championship, so I'm sure that's okay by everybody's standards. Everybody's fine with that. So there's my early 2-day review of the game. It's fun. You will lose track of time, so just set some alarms. Do something of that. Have tell your loved ones, hey, check in on me, and maybe just see that I'm doing okay. But I'll tell you what, if I'm fighting like right now, Tom, North Carolina State, I got this 5-star quarterback. It's me in Michigan, and so I need to I got to DM him. I've got to check in with the friends and the family. I got to, like, I'm trying to get this official visit scheduled. It's too early right now, but again, talking about your dynasty is almost as bad as talking about your fantasy team. Don't do it to other people who don't care. And Tom, you can tell you don't care. That's fine. So there you go. Go get the game. It's $70. You've got it. You might have to go buy a new game system as well. So that's, $400 or $500, $600. You've got it. Don't worry about it. So there you go. Tom, I've got some predictions that I've written about that I want to get your feelings on. And these aren't just Ohio State predictions. These are Big Ten national predictions. I'll give you this one first because it is something that doesn't happen all that often. And it's right along with what we were just talking about. Iowa will score 4 offensive touchdowns in a Big Ten game this year. Now, the last time that happened was October 1st, 2021. They have played in 27 conference games since they last scored 4 offensive touchdowns in a game. I'm saying Tim Lester is going to lead these boys to the promised land of 28 offensive points this year in a Big Ten game.
I'm trying to think through now in my head. I did not think to look up Iowa's schedule for this year. Do they have Indiana? Do they have Michigan State? Do they have Northwestern? I mean, I think there's going to be some real substandard teams in the Big Ten. And I think if you get the right matchup, I think this is possible. Do you have, Tony, do
Mhm.
you have the
Here you go.
schedule?
At Minnesota, at Ohio State, Washington, at Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, at UCLA, at Maryland, Nebraska.
Yeah, I think there's some possibilities in there. I think Michigan State's a possibility, and the road games doesn't help. The Northwestern one's a possibility. They tend to be better on defense and offense, but yeah, I mean, this is one where if they do it, it feels like it would be notable enough. It feels possible this year, and they have a lot of guys back from last year. Cade McNamara's back and healthy this year, and you've got a lot of the pieces from last year's team back, and you have removed the restrictor plate from the offense in the form of Brian Ferentz, so that's probably a good thing. So yeah, I think this feels almost like a coin flip to me. And obviously the fact that it hasn't happened since 2021 means that it would be a remarkable, notable thing if it does happen. But this feels like coin flippy. Like, yeah, I could absolutely see this happening, but it would not be a huge shock if it doesn't happen.
So they did this against Maryland. They won 51-14 back in 2021. I'm not sure how many of those were offensive. I know at least 4 of them, and maybe only 4. If they do it again against Maryland, does it even count? If the only 2 times you've done it in 4 years or whatever is Maryland,
That feels more like an ACC conference game than a Big Ten conference game. Like, I still don't think of Maryland as really like a Big Ten team. It just, when we go out there, when we go out to Rutgers, it's like, yeah, I mean, these are my people, but the accents and the, level of courtesy that you run into in your local bagel store and what have you is not really Midwestern in nature. And I kind of feel the same way about Maryland. So, yeah, I mean, I could see it happening. If it happens against Maryland, that's really more of an ACC achievement. But, yeah, maybe.
here's one for you. And this may not seem all that much of a stretch. Tyleik Williams will finish with at least 11 tackles for loss this year. He had 10 last year. So, yeah, one more, of course. Do you know the only defensive tackle at Ohio State to have over 11 tackles for loss, or at least 11 tackles for loss in the last 9 years?
In the last 9 years.
One guy.
Okay. One guy. Is it Devon Hamilton?
Nope, it is Draymond Jones.
All right.
That was your other guess. It was one of those 2.
That would have been my other guess. He is frequently my guess in terms of interior Ohio State defensive lineman over the last year. But yeah, that's a good one. Tyleik Williams feels like he kind of had his breakout season last year. I mean, he's on the cover of Phil Steele this year, like the national Phil Steele cover. So, I think he's a little bit more of a known quantity at this point, and this would have felt extremely bold a year ago, not particularly as bold. And again, a reminder, this is not a bold prediction show. This is just a prediction show. But, that's a good one where, something that hasn't happened in 9 years. Excellence in arbitrary data points there from Tony. Well done. But, that feels like a good one. And again, very, very realistic, especially considering, even if he does not play as many snaps per game, there, the potential for so many more games this year feels like that's going to be something that would get him, help get him there.
Yeah, and if I had gone back 10 years, I would have had it include Michael Bennett, and then 2 out of 10 seems less impressive. I will say on the season that I simmed just now, earlier today, Tyleik Williams finished with 17 and a half tackles for loss, and it was good enough for second-team All-American. Seems like it should be good enough for first team. And I should also mention, as we are talking, I'm running an Ohio State-Michigan game going on with this, just so you understand what's going on. I could have done that at the outset of the show, but I forgot. Here's one for you, Tom. I think this is an interesting one to me. Michigan quarterback Alex Orji will outrush Donovan Edwards at least 3 times this year. We know Orji can run the ball, and is effective at that. We also know Donovan Edwards at times gets shut down really, really badly. He's going to have to carry the ball more this year, so that means there's going to be more opportunities for him. But I could see a few times where there's Alex Orji with 85 yards rushing, Donovan Edwards with 65 yards rushing, something like that. I think they're going to need Alex Orji to run the ball, so he's going to do that. The focus is going to be stopping Donovan Edwards, and I think teams are going to be able to do that at times as well.
Well, Donovan Edwards has been so up and down, and you know, I'm comparing him to another running back from the state of Michigan, but this is going to sound like blasphemy. But do you remember how Barry Sanders would have games where he'd go for huge runs,
Mhm.
and then he'd have 16 carries for 13 yards in some games? If Donovan Edwards' whole career has kind of been like that, it's like, he averaged, it felt like 3 yards a carry for a huge chunk of last season and was not getting the ball a lot because they were not seeing the productivity. And then he had a couple long touchdown runs against Washington or whatever it was. Like he had a couple big plays here and there. And then, the Ohio State game 2 years ago, he had a couple 70-something yard touchdowns when Ohio State was really kind of in desperation mode, and it was just kind of like you got to get to the line and there's no one there. But then you take those away and it's like, well, there's not a lot of consistency there. And I feel like you're probably, he, I think, was banged up some last year, and that's probably part of it. But he can get banged up this year too, and you could miss some games or be limited in some games. And I think that's a really good one because I think the quarterback situation at Michigan is not great right now. There's not a game ready, high ranked guy like there has been the last couple of years with JJ McCarthy, where he was former 5-star kind of quarterback and had a year where he could sort of adjust and then boom, be the guy for a couple of years. They don't have that guy this year. Orji has been used very situationally. He's thrown one pass in his college career. Davis Warren, former preferred walk-on, he's in the mix. You got Jaden Davis, who I think they like, who's got some promise, but is still a true freshman. So what the heck is he going to be this year? No one really knows. There isn't really a guy, so they're just going to have to kind of make it work. And given the fact that Alex Orji has thrown the ball once in his college career in multiple years of being on the roster, that kind of tells me, I feel like, Tony, that might be the Michigan coaching staff telling me about Alex Orji's throwing without telling me about Alex Orji's throwing. So that means they're going to have to move the ball somehow, and they're probably, he's the starter because he's going to be running the ball more than you typically have in the past. So yeah, I like this one. This is a good one. This is one that seems like, ooh, that's really spicy, and then you think it through. It's like, no, I could definitely see that happening, maybe even more than 3 times.
I'm just wondering right now how many times it happened with JT Barrett and Ezekiel Elliott, because I'm sure it did. And it's not an insult to have predicted it, because that's a part of your offense and it's an effective part of your offense. And if it's successful, why go away from it? I do think Orji not throwing the ball to this point is also a change of pace type of thing. I mean, how often did Justin Fields or Tate Martell throw the ball when they came in as freshmen or redshirt freshmen? They're there for a certain thing, and so that's what they were focused on. But I think he's going to be an effective runner for them, and maybe a frustrating third down quarterback. I'd say for both teams, frankly, frustrating for Michigan fans at times, and certainly frustrating for the opposing defense when he picks something up with his legs. But it'll
Tony,
no
I'm
doubt
just
be
looking through
interesting.
this. I'm looking through this right now, and JT Barrett outrushed Ezekiel Elliott in the Rutgers game in 2014, in the Minnesota game in 2014. Those are the ones where he had over 100 yards rushing. He might have done it against Michigan State in 2014. No, not so. At least twice in 2014, he outrushed Ezekiel Elliott. So that's how he did it against Navy. He did it against Virginia Tech. So yeah, that did happen more often than you would think.
So let's go to my next one, which also involves the running game. A freshman will lead Ohio State rushing in a non-conference game. So we're talking James Peoples or Sam Williams-Dixon will lead Ohio State in rushing against Akron, Western Michigan, or Marshall. It will require a bunch of carries in the fourth quarter and perhaps, at least like a 30-yarder or something like that. I just wonder how much emphasis there's going to be for Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson over the first, I don't know, two and a half quarters of Akron. Like, how much do you really need to work them for that? How quickly does a James Peoples or Sam Williams-Dixon get involved in that game, and how long do you stick with them? Losing TC Caffey to an ACL tear has dwindled the depth chart in terms of who plays in the fourth quarter of those games. So I think one of those freshmen, it has to be one of those freshmen, or else like a walk-on like Chase Brecht, somebody that we've seen in the spring. but I don't know if it's going to be Akron or Western Michigan or Marshall, perhaps Akron, but I think there's a pretty good chance that you see one of these freshmen lead them in rushing, if not maybe more than once.
More than once seems pretty unlikely
Extreme.
to me, but if if you tell me it happens once, I could maybe see that. It feels like you're going to see, assuming Henderson and Judkins are healthy, you're going to see them get 8 to 10 carries in those games. It's not going to be 3 carries. Like they need to get them some work. And one thing that is maybe working against you here a little bit is you don't have the Notre Dame trip waiting in week 3 or week 4 or whatever it was last year. You don't have that equivalent this year, really. You really kind of go through the month of September without really seeing the Buckeyes get tested. You've got the 3 non-conference games. You got a week off. You got a trip to Michigan State, and none of those teams are probably in the top 50, I would say, in terms of national ranking, prestige, whatever this year. So you're not desperately worried about someone, tweaking an ankle or something like that and missing some huge game that's coming up. There's not a huge game coming up. So you're probably going to be seeing those guys get 10 carries. And if you give Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins both 10 carries, it feels like they're getting 50 yards. I mean, that and you break one and you're done for the day. So, yeah, I mean, I could see it. I think you're going to have a James Peoples gets 80 yards kind of game at some point there, and then it's just a matter of whether one of the veterans or even Will Howard, someone like that, gets puts up 85, something like
I
that.
didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's this one feels less likely than some of the other ones you've talked about, just for those couple of reasons. Absolutely within the realm of possibility, and I do think you're going to see a, let's say a 70, 75 yard kind of game out of one of the freshmen at some point in September. It's just a matter of, does one of the veterans have a bigger day than that in that same game?
Yeah, I'm reminded of the Ezekiel Elliott in 2013 against Florida A&M. He rushed for that season as a true freshman. He rushed for 262 yards. 162 of those yards came against Florida A&M. And that was a ugly, bad game. 14 carries for 162 yards. Nobody as bad as FAMU is on this schedule, but I'm also not looking for somebody to go for 162 yards. Maybe just a Demario McCall, Rutgers cleanup type of thing, or Bowling Green or whatever, would clean it up. Here's one that's pretty innocuous. UCLA will have its best home attendance in a decade. Now, they only have 6 home games. Some years, twice in the last decade, they've had 7 home games. But I think having the Big Ten come to them will bring the opposing fans in because it's something new. So they've got Indiana, Minnesota, Iowa is going to fill that place. USC, meh. Fresno State, whatever. Oregon is also there as well. So I think we could see as many as 70,000 people for some of those games, which only happens like once a year or two for them.
Yeah, I think one thing that's going to be working against them is I don't think there's a ton of energy and excitement around that program right now. And maybe we'll find out that I'm wrong next week and we'll talk to some UCLA folks and we'll be proven wrong there. But it just sort of, Chip Kelly left and Deshaun Foster came in, and I think there's, it's the guy who was the former star for the team, and I'm sure there's a little bit of excitement around that. But it just, there's a lot working against them. Just that the Pasadena is a long way from Westwood. It is not a convenient place. There's not a ton of juice around the program right now. I think that's a team that is probably going to struggle during its first few years in that move over to the Big Ten. And you've got USC, but I don't think USC is going to be having a huge year where you're going to fill that with red. I don't think, Oregon's going to have a big year, but I don't know that, Oregon going to Pasadena is something that happened basically every 2 years, more or less, under the Pac-12. So there's not going to be the novelty there. I don't want to besmirch Indiana fans, but I do not think that they are going to be packing the Rose Bowl with traveling fans. So, you're really Minnesota, I'm sure people will be excited to go to the Rose Bowl, and, that I'm sure that's going to be a draw, but I don't know if Minnesota fans travel quite that well. Iowa fans were just there a couple of years ago with the the year that Christian McCaffrey went for about 10,000 yards on them in the first quarter, right after they lost to Michigan State in the playoff, or in the Big Ten championship game in 2015. That was 2015.
So it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I know there were a ton of Iowa fans there for that Rose Bowl. I think that might be their best chance to do it, maybe. I just, like 70,000 fans does not sound like that many, but, how many UCLA fans are there for the Iowa game? 30,000, 35,000? Like, I think you're asking Iowa to do basically half of the lifting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I'm going to say, unless USC has a better year than expected, I'm going to say this does not happen.
Okay. I will tell you, Tom, they were at 52.6% capacity of a 91,000 seat stadium last year. So say 47,000 people a game there. And that was just last year. I think they'll beat last year, but we will see. Now's not the time for arguing. Last one, Tom. 5 Ohio State defensive players will score touchdowns this year. Only 3 times over the past decade have at least 5 players done so, defensive players. In 2021, however, 6 did it. I will give you $100 right now if you can name all 6 in the next 10 seconds. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Haskell Garrett,
5,
was that year?
6, 7, 8.
Let's see.
9, 10. Oh, dog.
Tate Martell. Yeah. Boy, 2021. That doesn't feel like that long ago, and yet here we are. I feel like Haskell Garrett had one that year.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Jerron Cage having the fumble return against Penn State? I think that might have been another one. Yeah, there were probably Cam Martinez had one, I think, that year, an interception return.
Yep.
Did Ryan Watts have one? No. Okay. What?
Close.
One of the
Similar.
Yeah. One of the corners who ended up transferring. Craig Young, I think, might have had a. Did Craig Young have one that year?
So that's 4.
Okay. That's 4. Boy, I think coming up with Cam Martinez and Craig Young really should be worth.
Those are the 2
at least 2 each. One of the corners. It was one of the corners who transferred. I think he had one. Maybe right at the end of right at the end of their safety who transferred. No, someone had one right at the end of the Maryland game.
Now you've got the positions correct.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Lathan Ransom? Did Lathan Ransom have one?
No, that's a dumb answer. No.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell me so you can save yourself your $100?
Oh, the $100 is out. You didn't get it done in the 10 seconds. Ronnie Hickman and Denzel Burke were the other 2.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Who could have remembered them?
Yes. Okay. That's right. Okay. So that's good. So, I'm going to need some clarification on this. We're going to play a little lawyer ball here. When you say defensive players, do you mean players will score touchdowns on defense? Or if, say, I don't know, say a safety who might be playing a little bit of fill-in running back and or on special teams, if he scores, does that count? Or are we talking about defensive touchdowns?
No, if Jaden Bonsu scores on offense, no, that does not count. Only during a defensive play, although I do count blocking a punt as a defensive play, just because I view punts as offensive football. So,
But that is very good news. You will be allowed into Big Ten media days with that attitude next week. That's good. Yeah. This is one of those things where it's not entirely random, but it's just so random that you get, turnovers are somewhat random, but to get turnovers in a spot where, Jordan Hancock scored on a pick 6 last year on one of the least likely pick 6s I think you'll see, where, in your mind, you're just jumping an out route and, then you kind of walk in. That was very much not it. And picking up a fumble, the thing that I think maybe works in their favor the most is the coverage should be pretty good in the secondary this year. The secondary should be pretty good, which, your mind immediately means, well, that means more interceptions. Yeah, maybe. But it also means quarterbacks are holding the ball more. And if you've got a good pass rush, you get some strip sacks, the ball's bouncing around in the backfield, someone gets a scoop and score. That's the kind of thing where you're going to have 2 or 3 of those probably to get to 6. touchdowns, and it's 6 different players or 6 total touchdowns?
Different players.
6 different players is zesty. That
We're
is
talking
asking
5, though. 5.
Yeah, 5. Yes, 5. But yeah, that is asking a lot. But I think it's certainly possible. It's just Haskell Garrett having, I think, a couple defensive touchdowns over the years is kind of like that's not the guy you would have necessarily projected as the guy who did it, but he just sort of the ball bounced to him a couple of times, or he got his hand up and deflected it, and so yeah, that would be. That would probably be a pretty good marker for this has been a good season of Ohio State football if 5 different guys score on defense. But given some of the other factors and the coverage and all of that and what should be a pretty decent pass rush, you sort of have the ingredients for that to happen this year.
And we all know defensive touchdowns are the marker of a tremendous defense, as referenced to the 2021 defense that everybody loves. And sure, defensive coordinator was fired through no fault of his own after that season. 4 defensive players scored touchdowns last year, 3 the year before. Year 3 of Jim Knowles' defense, that means 1 more defensive touchdown. 1 more defensive player scoring a touchdown. That's the way the formula goes. So it's not even a prediction. It's almost a guarantee. So that will do it for today. I want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. If you have not yet, hit the bell to be notified. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. And also subscribe to BuckeyeHuddle.com. Big Ten Media Days, just a couple days away. Fall camp, just a week after that. Things are going to start moving at a very, very rapid pace. So stick to this youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Also BuckeyeHuddle.com to keep abreast of all of it. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Flip the field here. And that's a great punt. Goes out of bounds down near the goal line. They'll spot it there. And the Michigan offense back out on the field. They've got a little time to work with, but they want to play, get closer, and then take a shot at the end zone or throw a Hail Mary now. And the deep shot falls incomplete. But wait, there is a flag on the play, so we'll check that out. So the offense obviously will decline the penalty and take the result of the play. Backed up with the 1, he's going to throw it. Couldn't find anybody open and just has to throw it away.
Now that's going to bring up a critical 3rd down here as we're late into this football game in a drive where they need points. This quarterback's got to take control of this huddle, make sure everybody's on the same page. You have multiple plays that you could go to, whether it's a run or a pass. But you've got to come up with a 1st down.
3rd down, backed up, looking to throw again. Just gives up on the play, throws it away, and now it's 4th down.
Well, that's not what you want to see as an offense when you're trailing late in a football game. An incompletion on 3rd down and long. It's a bit of a risk. With that clock looking the way it looks right now, I think you've got to go for it here and hope to convert on 4th and long.
Drops back, looking for a 4th down conversion. Running out of time in the pocket. Oh, they've stopped him short. What a 4th down play, and they will take over on downs now.